Hi, welcome to Starz Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain an American science fiction psychological thriller film called Donnie Darko, which was released in the year 2001, directed by Richard Kelly. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. On October 2, 1988, a young boy named Donnie regains consciousness in the middle of the road after sleepwalking the previous night. He looks around, initially bewildered by what has happened to him, before breaking into a smile. Then, he rides his bike back to his house in a quiet town in Virginia, where his family carries on with their morning as usual, despite his absence during the night. That evening, Donnie has dinner with his family, his parents, Eddie and Rose, and his sisters, Elizabeth and Samantha. Elizabeth and Eddie talk about politics, prompting Rose to suggest that Elizabeth should attend Harvard the following year. Donnie makes an inappropriate remark to his younger sister, sparking a disagreement between him and Elizabeth. Later that night, Rose confronts her son about sneaking out while everyone was asleep. Donnie reacts defensively and sarcastically suggests that she should take his medication instead. Frustrated, Rose leaves and discusses his behavior with Eddie. Unable to sleep, Eddie goes to the living room to watch television. Upstairs, Donnie is abruptly awakened by a mysterious voice, which lures him into sleepwalking out of his room. Donnie walks past his father, who has dozed off in the living room. The voice continues calling to him as he steps outside into the dark streets. Eventually, Donnie arrives at a golf course and grins at the figure standing before him. Before him is a peculiar individual dressed in a disturbing rabbit costume. The rabbit informs him that the world will come to an end in 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 12 seconds. Back at home, Elizabeth has just returned when something loud and massive crashes into the house, startling everyone. The next morning, Donnie wakes up on the golf course, discovering a marker in his hand and the numbers 28, 6, 42, and 12 written on his arm. As he walks back home, he notices police officers and onlookers gathered around his house, watching as a jet engine is being removed from what was his bedroom. The FAA offers the family temporary accommodations and financial compensation for the damages in exchange for signing a confidentiality agreement. Donnie later finds out that the FAA has yet to determine the origin of the jet engine. In their hotel room, Samantha asks about the jet engine, but her older siblings brush off her questions. In the next room, their parents reminisce about a former high school classmate who passed away on the way to prom following a paranoid breakdown. Eddie worries that Donnie might suffer a similar fate. The following day, Donnie and Samantha meet up with their classmates, Ronald, Sean, Joni, and Cherita. The girls excitedly ask about the jet engine incident, while Donnie's friends offer him a cigarette. Ronald starts teasing Cherita, but Donnie steps in to defend her. At school, Donnie attends an English lesson where the class analyzes The Destructors by Graham Greene. His teacher, Karen Pomeroy, asks for his thoughts on a passage about destruction. He argues that because destruction is a kind of creation, the characters in the novel might want to see the world collapse in order to bring about change. The classroom door opens, and all eyes turn to the new student, Gretchen Ross. Ms. Pomeroy challenges Gretchen to sit next to the boy she finds most appealing, and she picks Donnie. On their way to Donnie's therapist, Eddie complains about rebuilding their home and how the FAA refuses to disclose any details about the incident. Distracted by the discussion, Eddie almost runs over an elderly woman standing in the middle of the road. Donnie approaches her to offer help, and she whispers something into his ear. At Dr. Thurman's office, Donnie recounts his encounter with the figure in the rabbit costume, whom he has named Frank. Donnie describes how Frank told him that the world is going to end, though he refuses to accept it as the truth. The following day, Donnie's class watches a motivational video about overcoming fears, presented by Jim Cunningham. Once again, Donnie hears Frank's voice, urging him to pay close attention to the video. While asleep on the couch, Donnie dreams about the school submerged in water. He awakens to see Frank staring at him. Under Frank's influence, Donnie leaves the house, carrying an axe. He arrives at a building's water pipe and smashes it. The next morning, while waiting for the bus, Donnie teases Samantha about a short story she wrote. Sean points out that their bus is running 20 minutes late. Two girls from their school rush over, announcing that the school is shut down due to flooding. At the school, Principal Cole stands inside the waterlogged building, where a broken water main is leaking. Outside, an axe is embedded in the head of the school's statue. A message scrawled at the base reads, "They made me do it." While walking back to class, Donnie notices Gretchen being cornered by the school bullies, Seth and Ricky. The two walk together, and Donnie learns that Gretchen and her mother moved away to escape her stepfather, who had stabbed her mother. Donnie confesses that he was once arrested for setting an abandoned house on fire but reassures her that he has turned his life around since then. Before parting ways, Donnie asks Gretchen out, and she agrees. During his next therapy session, Dr. Thurman hypnotizes Donnie, and he starts talking about Gretchen. Dr. Thurman shifts the discussion to school and his family, but Donnie continues to focus on girls. even fantasizing about actress Christina Applegate. The session abruptly ends when Dr. Thurman notices Donnie unzipping his pants. Back at school, police officers instruct the students to write, "They made me do it," on the board to compare their handwriting to the vandalism. When it's Donnie's turn, Principal Cole finds his rushed writing suspicious. Later, in the bathroom, Seth confronts Donnie, accusing him of spreading rumors that he caused the flooding. Seth then pulls out a knife and presses it against Donnie's throat, accusing him of being the real culprit before storming off. That afternoon, Donnie and his friends gather in a field, shooting at bottles and arguing about the Smurfs. Their conversation is interrupted when the same elderly woman Eddie almost hit earlier steps into the road again, startling a driver. Donnie's friends call her Grandma Death because she is often seen standing in the middle of the street, checking her mailbox, which never contains any letters. That night, the school holds an emergency PTA meeting to discuss the culprit behind the flooding and vandalism. The gym teacher, Mrs. Kitty Farmer, insists that the act was inspired by The Destructors, a novel taught in Ms. Pomeroy's English class. Mrs. Farmer argues that the book encouraged destruction and should be removed from the curriculum. Meanwhile, Donnie encounters Frank in his bathroom, who assures him that no one will uncover the truth. Donnie stares at the eerie figure, but an invisible barrier seems to separate them. He demands to know why Frank guided him to flood the school, but Frank cryptically warns that they are in great danger. When Donnie asks where he came from, Frank responds by questioning whether Donnie believes in time travel. Their conversation abruptly ends when Samantha enters the bathroom, and Frank vanishes. On Poetry Day, Donnie reads a poem he wrote about Frank. Later, Mrs. Farmer introduces a lesson on attitude, but Donnie challenges her ideas, arguing that human emotions and life itself cannot be reduced to simple categories. His defiance results in his parents being called to the principal's office. Despite Mrs. Farmer's outrage, Rose and Eddie remain unconcerned about Donnie's behavior, though they revoke his after-school privileges as a consequence. Mrs. Farmer scolds Rose about her parenting, leaving her stunned. On October 10, Donnie discusses time travel theories with his science teacher, Dr. Kenneth Monatoff. Dr. Monatoff hands him a book titled The Philosophy of Time Travel, written by a former nun who later turned to science. Donnie recognizes the author's name, Roberta Sparrow, as Grandma Death. During his next therapy session, Donnie talks about Roberta and how Frank instructed him to explore time travel, leading him to believe Frank wants him to contact her. Donnie tells Dr. Thurman that Roberta once said, "Every living creature dies alone," which reminded him of his childhood dog's passing. Donnie admits that he has stopped thinking about God but confesses that he doesn't want to die alone. That evening, while watching football, Donnie sees a translucent bubble-like shape emerge from his father and sister, seemingly guiding their movements. He looks down and notices the same bubble protruding from his chest, directing him somewhere. Following its lead, Donnie enters his parents' bedroom and finds a gun hidden in the closet. A week later, Donnie walks home with Gretchen, and they discuss the idea of turning back time. Donnie leans in for a kiss, but Gretchen pulls away, saying she wants their first kiss to be special and memorable. Concerned about Donnie's behavior, Rose and Eddie visit Dr. Thurman to talk about him. Dr. Thurman suggests that Donnie is terrified of the world, causing him to disconnect from reality. She also reveals details about Frank, which comes as a surprise to his parents. The signs point to Donnie experiencing daytime hallucinations and paranoid schizophrenia. Meanwhile, Donnie repeatedly stabs a knife into his bathroom mirror, envisioning Frank's reflection staring back at him. Days later, Jim Cunningham holds a school assembly arranged by Mrs. Farmer. Jim presents a moral lesson featuring a character named Frank, momentarily distracting Donnie. Once Jim starts receiving questions from the students, Donnie finds his responses ridiculous and begins criticizing him. He gives blunt and inappropriate advice to the students who had asked their questions earlier. The adults are appalled by Donnie's remarks, yet the students cheer for him as he is escorted out. After school, Donnie vents to Gretchen about Jim's hypocrisy. He hands her Roberta's book and explains that he has been witnessing strange occurrences linked to it. Seeking answers, they visit Roberta's house, but no one answers the door. Eventually, while checking her mailbox, they spot Roberta observing them from her terrace. In his head, Donnie hears Frank instructing him to send Roberta a letter. The next day, Mrs. Farmer's determination to instill morality in the students disrupts the other teachers. Dr. Monatoff refuses to discuss philosophy with Donnie when he brings up God in the conversation, and Ms. Pomeroy confiscates students' copies of The Destructors. While walking home from school, Donnie discovers Jim's wallet on the ground, revealing his address. During Gretchen and Donnie's science presentation, Seth and Ricky make a comment about Gretchen's stepfather, upsetting her. She storms out of school, with Donnie chasing after her. Overcome with emotion, Gretchen kisses him, cementing their relationship. That night, Donnie and Gretchen watch a movie together. Gretchen falls asleep midway through the film, allowing Donnie to communicate with Frank. Frank removes his costume's head, revealing the face of a young man with an injured eye. He recounts that both his father and grandfather share the name Frank. The movie distorts, displaying a portal that appears to lead into the sky. Then, Donnie envisions flames as Frank instructs him to burn it to the ground. Determined, Donnie leaves the theater alone, formulating a plan. While Jim hosts the school's talent show, where Samantha's dance group performs, Donnie sneaks into Jim's house and douses it in gasoline. As Jim's house is engulfed in flames, the crowd at the talent show erupts in cheers. Donnie returns to the cinema, seeing Gretchen still asleep, unaware that he had left. The following morning, Donnie confesses his concerns about his sanity to his father. Not wanting his son to be weighed down by such thoughts, Eddie encourages Donnie to always express himself, regardless of what others think. Donnie feels reassured by his father's unwavering confidence in him. As firefighters work to put out the flames at Jim's house, the news reports that authorities have discovered explicit material involving minors, leading to Jim's arrest. On October 24, Ms. Pomeroy is dismissed from her job without explanation. Meanwhile, Samantha's dance group is invited to perform in California, thrilling their coach, Mrs. Farmer. However, her excitement is cut short when she learns of Jim's arrest. In one of her final classes, Ms. Pomeroy uses the rabbits from Watership Down as a metaphor for human existence. But Donnie interrupts, arguing that rabbits cannot be compared to humans because they lack complex emotions. Gretchen counters, explaining that the rabbits in the novel are products of the author's imagination, thereby carrying his emotions. That afternoon, Mrs. Farmer asks Rose to chaperone the dance group's trip to California, as she needs to stay behind to testify in Jim's defense, believing his arrest to be a setup. Later, Rose stumbles upon a disturbing drawing Donnie has made in his room. She tells him that she and Samantha will be leaving for California, and with Eddie away in New York, he and Elizabeth will be home alone. Sensing her unease about his artwork, Donnie asks her how it feels to have a son like him. She reassures him with a warm response, telling him she feels lucky to have him. A few days later, Elizabeth and Donnie bid farewell to Rose and Samantha as they leave for California. After school, Donnie finds Ms. Pomeroy packing up her belongings. Inspired by her story of a linguist who declared cellar door to be the most beautiful phrase in the English language, Donnie approaches Cherita, telling her that things will improve for her. Tearfully, Cherita runs off, leaving her earmuffs in his hands. Donnie looks down and notices that she has also dropped a notebook with his name on the cover. Later, Donnie visits Dr. Thurman, who places him under hypnosis and asks about his parents. Donnie recalls the disappointment of not receiving the Christmas gift he had wanted, which left him with regret. When Dr. Thurman inquires about any other regrets, Donnie smiles sheepishly and admits to his crimes. He explains that he had no choice but to obey Frank since Frank had saved his life, fearing that he would be alone if he didn't comply. Donnie begins to cry, his face reddening, as he confesses Frank's prophecy about the world ending. Still under hypnosis, Donnie picks up a stuffed dog and cradles it for comfort. Then, he opens his eyes and screams, seeing Frank in front of him. His expression softens as he tells Dr. Thurman that the sky will open up. Dr. Thurman reminds him that if that happens, only he and Frank will remain. The thought brings Donnie to tears until Dr. Thurman snaps him out of hypnosis. Before he leaves, she reveals that his medication is merely a placebo and advises him to stop taking it. She explains the difference between atheists and agnostics, classifying him as the latter. On October 29, Elizabeth excitedly informs Donnie that she has been accepted into Harvard. He suggests throwing a Halloween party to celebrate. That night, Gretchen arrives at the party, visibly distressed over her missing mother. Donnie takes her to his room, where she shares her suspicion that her stepfather is responsible. The two share an intimate moment before rejoining the party. Meanwhile, Elizabeth searches for someone named Frank. Donnie's euphoric mood suddenly shifts to dread. He notices the bubble-like projection emerging from his chest, leading him to a note on the fridge that says Frank went out to buy beer. The bubble continues to shift, showing him unsettling visions. Donnie quickly takes Gretchen, Ronald, and Sean away from the party. They arrive at Roberta's house, where Donnie and Gretchen enter through the cellar door. As they search for Roberta, Seth and Ricky ambush them, holding them at knife point. Ricky throws Gretchen to the ground before scaring Ronald and Sean into fleeing. He then spots an approaching car and warns Seth, who has Donnie pinned down. Ricky escapes just before the vehicle gets close. Roberta suddenly appears in the middle of the road, forcing the car to swerve, accidentally running over Gretchen. The horrific scene prompts Seth to release Donnie and flee. Two boys step out of the car, one of them being Frank, now just a regular teenager. Consumed by grief, Donnie retrieves the gun he stole from his parents' room and shoots Frank in the eye. As Frank's friend runs away, Roberta approaches Donnie, having received the letter he sent. She warns him that a storm is coming and urges him to act quickly. That morning, Donnie carries Gretchen's body back to his house. He takes his parents' car and drives to a ridge overlooking the town, with Gretchen's body beside him. As he laughs bitterly at his helplessness, Donnie watches the growing vortex consume the plane carrying Rose and Samantha. Gazing at Gretchen's lifeless face, Donnie's mind replays the events of the past 28 days, reflecting on the letter he wrote to Roberta. He expresses his fear that the time travel book might not be fiction and hopes that, despite everything, there is still something to look forward to. Donnie suddenly finds himself back in his old bedroom, laughing as he realizes he has been given a second chance. It is October 2nd again, he can rewrite the past and save Gretchen. He stays in bed as the jet engine crashes into his room, crushing him beneath it. The people who, in another timeline, would have been deeply affected by Donnie's actions wake up from haunting dreams, including the real Frank. The next morning, Gretchen, who has no recollection of Donnie, rides past the Darko house as his body is taken away. This version of Gretchen never met Donnie, so even when she waves at Rose, neither of them recognize each other in this new reality. That's my explanation for the movie, Donnie Darko. So, what do you guys think about the movie? Write in the comment, turn on the notification and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.